The evening air in the city felt cold, but inside her small apartment, Rebecca felt a heat rising inside her chest. She sat by the window, looking out at the distant lights of the city she had once dreamed of conquering. But now, everything felt different. The excitement had drained away, leaving behind an empty ache. She glanced down at the delicate velvet box resting in her hands. It was a symbol of everything that had gone wrong, a reminder of the reckless bet she had made. A few months ago, it had all seemed like harmless fun, a joke between friends. The bet had been simple: marry the first man she met without any attachment, just for the thrill of it. It wasn't supposed to matter. She wasn't supposed to care. But now, she couldn't stop thinking about him. The man she had married in a whirlwind. Ethan. Her fingers traced the edge of the ring on her finger, the one she had worn every day since that impulsive ceremony. At first, it was just part of the joke, a shiny trinket to prove she had done it. But as the days turned into weeks, as their lives tangled together, she found herself waking up with him in her thoughts, going to sleep with him on her mind. Rebecca had promised herself that she would never fall for him. This was just a game. A test. Yet here she was, questioning everything. Could it be that the love she thought she would never find had slipped quietly into her heart, without warning? Or was it just guilt? Was she starting to care because she had to? Because she was too far in to turn back? Rebecca had always been the kind of woman who avoided risks. Life, for her, was about playing it safe. She grew up with the understanding that some choices were just too big, too consequential. Her parents had drilled into her mind the importance of stability, of not giving in to the whims of passion or chance. They had molded her into someone who was cautious, practical, always thinking ahead. But now, looking down at the wedding ring on her finger, Rebecca couldn't help but wonder when that caution had turned into fear. She had spent so many years protecting herself, building walls around her heart, refusing to let anyone in. She'd watched her friends chase after love and lose it, watched her family struggle with relationships that were supposed to last forever, but crumbled under the weight of the real world. When the bet started, it felt like a game, something lighthearted, something that didn't mean anything. There was no way she could fall for him, no way this could go beyond the joke. Ethan, with his confident smile and reckless charm, was a challenge, an opportunity, to prove she was above it all. She could marry him, laugh about it later, and move on. But what she hadn't anticipated was his kindness. She hadn't expected him to see past her walls, to treat her with respect and affection in a way that no one else had. He wasn't just playing along with the bet. He had begun to care for her, and somehow that made it harder to ignore her own feelings. Rebecca's innocence wasn't just in the fact that she hadn't planned to fall for him. It was in her uncertainty about what it meant to love someone. She had never allowed herself to be vulnerable before, never given anyone the power to hurt her. But Ethan's sincerity made it hard to push him away. For the first time, she found herself looking at the world differently. Maybe love didn't have to be about grand gestures or perfect timing. Maybe it was about two people choosing to fight for each other, even when things didn't go according to plan. Maybe, just maybe, she could let herself be loved. But as the weight of her feelings grew, so did the fear. Fear of being hurt. Fear of trusting someone with her heart. Fear that, after all the years of being careful, she had finally let go of the one thing she swore she could never lose: control. As the days went by, Rebecca couldn't ignore the nagging feeling inside her. The bet had started as a joke, a harmless game to pass the time. Ethan had been an easy target at first, just another man who didn't take life too seriously. But as she spent more time with him, something began to shift. She started to see beyond the bravado, beyond the casual nature of their marriage. Ethan was different. He wasn't playing games. He treated her with respect, listened to her fears, and held her close when the world seemed to be spinning too fast. He didn't just see her as a challenge or a prize to be won. He saw her for who she was, and that realization started to hit Rebecca like a ton of bricks. At first, she told herself that she was still in control, that she could play along with the marriage and walk away when it was all over. But as Ethan's kindness grew, so did the weight of her conscience. She couldn't keep pretending. The longer she stayed with him, the more she realized that she had been hiding behind a mask of self-protection for far too long. Rebecca had always believed in playing it safe, never getting too involved, never risking anything that could hurt her. She'd spent her life focusing on her career, on securing her future in a world that could feel so uncertain. But now, for the first time, she saw the truth that Ethan had been trying to teach her all along. Life wasn't about avoiding pain. It was about living fully, taking risks, and allowing yourself to be vulnerable enough to experience the beauty of real connection. The more Rebecca thought about it, the more she understood that she had been living in fear. Fear of losing control, of being hurt, of opening herself up to someone else's emotions. It wasn't just about Ethan. It was about her own inability to trust, her refusal to accept that love wasn't about perfection. It was about flaws, mistakes, and, most importantly, growth. She realized that her entire life had been spent in a bubble of self-preservation, a bubble that had kept her from experiencing the true depth of what it meant to love and be loved in. Return! But now, she was faced with the truth. She could no longer hide from it. The bet was over. The game had ended. But in the end, it wasn't about the bet at all. It was about her willingness to change, to grow, to let go of her past fears, and embrace the possibility of a future with someone who genuinely cared for her. Rebecca felt a weight lift off her chest. She wasn't the same person who had entered this marriage months ago. The woman standing before Ethan now was different, stronger, more self-aware, and ready to face whatever came next. She had learned that the greatest risks often led to the most beautiful rewards. And in Ethan, she had found a reward she never thought she would deserve. It was a moral awakening, one that forced Rebecca to confront the walls she'd built around her heart and to reconsider her own definition of happiness. She no longer needed to play it safe. She no longer needed to keep everyone at arm's length. With Ethan, she had learned that sometimes the best thing you can do in life is let go of control and trust that things would work out the way they were meant to. As the days passed, the tension between Rebecca and Ethan began to shift. It wasn't just the shared moments of laughter or the casual touches that had started to mean something. It was the deeper, quieter moments that really began to change things. One evening, as they sat together on the couch after dinner, Ethan turned to her, his voice soft, his gaze steady. "You've been distant," he said, his words carrying a weight that made Rebecca's heart race. She glanced at him, her chest tightening. She had always been good at keeping her emotions in check, at staying just a little too far away from anyone who might get too close. But there was something in Ethan's eyes, a sincerity that made her want to open up, to let go of the walls she'd spent years building around herself. "I'm fine," she lied, her voice barely above a whisper. It wasn't the truth, and they both knew it. She could feel the air between them thick with unspoken words, the weight of everything she hadn't said. Ethan didn't push. He didn't press her for answers. Instead, he reached for her hand, his touch warm and comforting, as if offering her a lifeline. "You don't have to keep pretending with me," he said, his voice gentle but insistent. "I know you're scared, but you don't have to face this alone." Tears welled up in Rebecca's eyes, catching her off guard. She had always believed that vulnerability was a weakness. She had always believed that love was a game, something to be won, never something to be freely given. But Ethan's words shattered that belief, forcing her to confront the feelings she had been suppressing for so long. "I don't know how to do this," she confessed, her voice trembling with emotion. "I don't know how to trust. I've never been able to let anyone in, and now I'm afraid it's too late." Ethan didn't say anything at first. Instead, he moved closer, his presence steady and unyielding. He cupped her face in his hands, wiping away the tear that had slipped down her cheek. "It's never too late," he whispered. "We can start over, Rebecca, one step at a time. I'm not going anywhere. Not now. Not ever." For the first time, Rebecca allowed herself to lean into him, to let go of the walls she had spent so long building. She allowed herself to feel the warmth of his embrace, the comfort of knowing that, for once, she didn't have to protect herself from the world. Ethan was there. He wasn't going to leave. He wasn't going to judge her for the mistakes she'd made. In that moment, everything changed. It wasn't just a shift in their relationship, it was a shift in Rebecca herself. She realized that love wasn't about playing games or holding back. It was about trust, vulnerability, and the courage to be fully seen. And for the first time in her life, she was willing to let someone see her. All of her. The tears she had been holding back flowed freely now, but they were no longer tears of fear. They were tears of release, of letting go. And as Ethan held her, comforting her with nothing but his presence, she realized that the bet, the game that had started all of this, no longer mattered. What mattered was the person she had become, the person Ethan had helped her see within, herself. She was no longer hiding behind the walls she had so carefully constructed. She was ready to be vulnerable, to be loved, and to love in return. Ethan's expression hardened as he watched Rebecca struggle with her emotions, her vulnerability still raw and unguarded. The air between them was thick with unspoken words, but something deeper was beginning to stir inside him. As much as he had come to care for her, he couldn't ignore the feeling that there was something, someone, standing in the way of her happiness. He had been patient, understanding, giving her space to heal, but now he couldn't stand to watch her suffer anymore. His protective instincts kicked in, and the determination in his heart grew stronger. The phone rang, its shrill tone cutting through the silence of the room. Ethan's eyes flicked to Rebecca, who flinched at the sound. She didn't reach for the phone, didn't even look at it, and Ethan knew it was because she didn't want to face the past, the people who had once hurt her. But he could see the fear on her face, the way her hand tightened around her coffee cup, the way her shoulders tensed as if bracing for impact. Without a word, Ethan stood up and walked to the phone, his jaw clenched, his body tense with resolve. He didn't even bother to check the caller ID. He already knew who it was. He picked up the phone, his voice calm but unyielding. "Rebecca's not taking any calls right now," he said, the words slipping out with ease, but the force behind them unmistakable. "And if you think for 1 second that you can continue treating her like she's nothing, you're mistaken." The voice on the other end stuttered in surprise, but Ethan's tone never wavered. "I don't care who you are or what you want. Rebecca deserves better than this. She deserves peace, and I will make sure she gets it." His gaze flicked to Rebecca, who was still sitting on the couch, her head turned slightly away from him, but he could see the relief in her eyes. She wasn't alone in this anymore. Ethan had made it clear that he would protect her at all costs, and in that moment she knew he meant it. He hung up the phone, his hand still gripping it tightly, as if trying to contain the anger that burned in him for the way Rebecca had been treated. But he didn't let it show. Instead, he turned to her, his expression softening, the protective fury replaced by quiet determination. "Whoever that was," he said, walking over to her and sitting beside her, "they don't get to hurt you anymore. I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere." Rebecca looked at him, her eyes filled with gratitude, and for the first time she felt a sense of security that she had never known. Ethan wasn't just here for her when it was easy. He wasn't just here for the good times. He was here for the hard moments, the moments that made her feel small and broken. He was here for the fight. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know what to say." Ethan placed a hand on hers, squeezing it gently. "You don't need to say anything. I've got you. Always." He meant it. His protective instincts weren't just a reaction to what had happened. They were a promise, a vow that he would stand by her side no matter what. And in that moment, Rebecca knew that she wasn't alone anymore. She had Ethan, someone who would fight for her, someone who would stand in the face of whatever came their way and never back down. The atmosphere in the room shifted, a weight lifted, replaced by something stronger. Hope. And with that, they both knew that together they could face whatever challenges lay ahead. Ethan had made it clear that he would protect her, no matter what, and Rebecca realized that for the first time in her life she had someone who truly cared enough to fight for her happiness. The tension in the room was replaced by a sense of calm, the kind that only comes when you know, without a doubt, that you're no longer fighting alone. The night was thick with tension. Rebecca sat alone in the dimly lit living room, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her mind racing. She had no idea what Ethan was planning, but she could feel the weight of something monumental hanging in the air. Her heart beat loudly in her chest, thudding with both fear and anticipation. For months, she had been trying to move on from the past, trying to erase the memories of the betrayal and the pain. But every time she thought she was close, something pulled her back, reminding her of the scars she couldn't outrun. Tonight, though, something felt different. She could sense that Ethan was up to something. But what? What could he possibly do to make everything right? The sound of the front door creaked open, and her breath caught in her throat. She didn't need to look up to know it was Ethan. She could feel his presence like a steady pulse in the room. But this time, something was different about him. His movements were deliberate, measured, as though every step was carefully planned. "You're here," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Ethan didn't respond immediately, his face serious, focused. He walked slowly towards her, the air around him crackling with an unspoken energy. The suspense stretched between them, thick as a fog. She had no idea what was coming, but she could feel the ground shifting beneath her feet, the quiet before the storm. And then, as if sensing the question that hung in the air, he spoke, his voice low, commanding, with an underlying strength that made her spine straighten. "I've been waiting for the right moment to do this," Ethan began, his gaze locking with hers. His expression softened, but his words were firm. "And now, I'm not just fighting for you anymore. I'm fighting for both of us. We've both been through hell, and it's time for us to take control of our future." Rebecca's eyes widened, her heart racing in her chest. She had no idea what he was talking about, but his words were like a spark, igniting something deep within her. There was a fire in his eyes, a determination that left her breathless. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, weathered envelope, handing it to her. "This," he said, "is the first step in the fight for our happiness. It's not just for us. It's for everyone who's ever been told they couldn't do it, couldn't make it. This is for those who've been knocked down and left behind. Rebecca stared at the envelope, a rush of emotions flooding her chest. She could see the weight of his words, the gravity of the moment. She didn't know what was inside, but she could feel the significance of it. And suddenly she realized that Ethan wasn't just asking her to trust him. He was asking her to believe in something bigger, something that could change everything. With trembling hands, she tore open the envelope. Inside was a letter, an invitation. But more than that, it was a promise. A promise that whatever came next, they would face it together. Ethan had made a decision, and he wanted her to be part of it. But the words in the letter were not just about him. They were about a movement, a chance to fight back against everything that had tried to tear them down. Rebecca's heart raced as she read the letter, the words sinking in, filling her with an energy she hadn't felt in years. Ethan wasn't just fighting for her. He was leading the charge for a life that was theirs to take, if only they had the courage to go after it. As she looked up from the letter, she saw Ethan standing tall, his jaw set, his eyes burning with resolve. "This is the moment," he said, his voice steady, unwavering. "The moment we take back control. The moment we show the world that we're—" The suspense that had gripped her heart melted away, replaced by something new, something more powerful. Inspiration. The idea of fighting for their future, for their happiness, ignited a fire in her soul. For the first time in a long time, she felt hope, real, palpable hope. She wasn't alone in this anymore. With every word Ethan spoke, with every breath he took, she could feel the weight of the past lifting from her shoulders. It wasn't just about winning a battle. It was about reclaiming the life they deserved. And together, they would take on whatever came their way. Ethan reached out, his hand brushing against hers, a silent promise passing between them. "Are you with me?" Without a second thought, Rebecca nodded, her voice firm, resolute. "I'm with you." The tension in the room dissolved, replaced by a powerful sense of purpose. There was no more waiting for the right moment. It had arrived, and together, they would face whatever challenges came their way, stronger than they had ever been before. He stood frozen in the doorway, his eyes locked on the sight before him. She wasn't crying. She wasn't angry. She was simply sitting there, holding the torn-up contract that started it all. The silence between them was louder than any scream. She looked at him with a calmness that cut deeper than rage. "I read it, Liam. Every word, every single word." His knees gave way as guilt stormed through him like a tidal wave. This was never supposed to go that far, but she had loved him, even if it started as a cruel joke. "I thought I was a bet." Her voice cracked like glass under pressure. "But somewhere, I became your wife, and I hoped I was more than that." Her tears didn't fall. She had already cried them all in private. Liam knelt, ashamed, broken, stripped of ego. The bet that made him feel powerful had now shattered his soul. He whispered, "I was a fool, Emma, the biggest one alive." She looked away, not out of anger, but pain. "The worst part is, I believed you. I trusted you." He couldn't deny it. She had every reason to walk away. But then came her question, soft, raw, unexpected. "Was it ever real, Liam? Even a little?" He didn't hesitate. "Every moment after I fell for you." "Yes." Silence again. And then, she whispered, "Then prove it." The next weeks were his redemption in motion. Liam gave up everything, his company, his fortune, his pride. He worked 2 jobs, lived small, and donated to orphan shelters, where Emma grew up, not for show, not for applause, but because he needed to become someone worthy, not just of her love, but of the second chance she offered. She watched from a distance. At first, she thought it was an act, but day after day he kept showing up, with no camera, no crowd. Emma saw the change, not in his clothes or wealth, but in his humility, in his silence, in his kindness. He volunteered at hospitals. He started a free mentorship for kids who had no guidance, and every evening he'd leave a rose on her doorstep, silent, hopeful. 6 months passed. She opened the door one evening. He was there. Hands, covered in grease from work, no suit, no watch, just a man who learned how to love. "You left a rose," she said. "Every day," he replied. "Until you opened the door or asked me to stop." She smiled, softly, with eyes that had seen pain, now seeing truth. "I forgive you," she whispered. "But this time, love me honestly, completely, no secrets." And he promised, on his knees, with nothing but a heart reborn. They started over, not as strangers bound by a cruel game, but as two broken hearts rebuilding something real. Their story went viral, not because of scandal, but because of grace, growth, redemption. Millions watched. Millions cried. Millions believed in love again. Emma opened a center for abused women. Liam funded it, quietly, humbly, behind the scenes. They called it Second Chances. They had kids,